It's time to begin our second panel discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, our second panel discussion for the day revolves around the theme transit-oriented development in Gujarat. In fact, the panel will discuss the importance of the TOD in urban planning and also the enabling mechanisms that are needed for it to promote economic development. In fact, our first panel discussion focused on smart cities and whether it's a city that's being smart or is it the smart people driving the city towards progress. While this is the panel discussion that will clearly focus on transit-oriented development in Gujarat. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, it's also time to invite our set of panel members and moderating the panel discussion. Firstly, I'd like to invite Mr. Anurag Janwar, Director, CRISIL Real Estate Ratings. May we please invite Mr. Anurag Janwar on the dais. And with that, I'd also like to invite our panel members, Mr. Anand Choksi, Founder and Owner, Remax Advantage. Mr. Bakar Gandhi, Chairman and Managing Director, Gandhi Realty India Private Limited. Mr. Harsh Goel, Director of Landscape Architecture and Urban Design, Stantec. And Mr. Rakesh Asrani, Managing Director, Pacifica Companies. And can we have a huge round of applause for our esteemed set of panel members one more time? We are also joined by Mr. Rocky Israni, if I may please. He's here, yes, he is. So I think we have one chair extra. It's just the chair that is extra. All right. So my script is right. This is just the chair that's extra, and we'll have it removed a little later. Not a problem. So we have our panel members here. So let's not delay it anymore. Let's get started with our panel discussion. And I'd like to hand over the proceedings to our moderator for the session, Mr. Anurag Janwar.
So good evening, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here and being with such a elite group of panelists. So some of them are from the, I would say, they know in and out on the supply side as well as the demand side. There are some who are basically bringing the supply in the market. They have a perspective from across the country. Then we have architect and master planners who basically know how the needs of the markets have evolved over years. So we have heard in the first panel that smart cities are going to be the need of the hour. And a couple of points which I took from the first session was urbanization is going to be there, and this is actually going to create. This is already creating a lot of pressure on the physical infrastructure in the cities, and it's just a starting. Then obviously there is a need for excellent public transport system. We heard the audience speak about islands of traffic woes in the city, which is there. And we also know that we are required to invest a lot of money, billions and trillions of money for creating a good transportation network across the cities. One of the states which we all know, Gujarat, has been taking a lot of steps towards creation of excellent public transport. Some of them are under planning stage, some of them are under execution stage. Now, a transit-oriented development typically would mean that you are creating a public transport and you want to kind of monetize that by providing real estate around it. And given that what we have seen over the last decade or so, primarily the funds need is very, very high. And hence government wants to undertake this on a PPP model. But there are challenges which are involved in this. And there are opportunities also involved in this. So in the first round, I would request the panel to just share their thoughts on the existing status of transportation and what are the models they feel can help to cover this, or kind of take care of these issues which we are facing. And we can basically be, if you can bring in any global perspective, that will be welcome. And then we can look at specific aspects from the Gujarat state.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. I think so. Let's talk about BRTs, and Ahmedabad is the most pioneer, and I mean the most successful. The BRTs where it is same is running on, but compared to other cities of country, if it would have been on a more effective routes currently, then it is the best options which we can, and. Secondly, for the dense area and for the cities area, I think so. Even a monorail is also a very good options, which we can look around. And third is what I feel for particularly for a state like Gujarat, where we have a straight connections with all the metro cities along with our smaller cities connecting, is the fast rail on a same current tracks what we are using it currently. So these are the basic what we feel we can use the same resources of that railway, and by putting some of the fast railway or a small or a shorter spans between these two can be more effective and economically more effective, I think so.
Hi, good evening. My name is Anand Choksi, owner of Remax Advantage. Current state of, Anurag, as you're asking me, the current state of public transit in Ahmedabad, if we're talking about in particular in Ahmedabad, I think there's a huge scope of opportunity for development. BRTS has been just, I think, tip of the iceberg, or a ray of hope that, you know, public transit can be accepted into the system. Right now, the biggest challenge I am seeing is that, first of all, if the public transit was being accepted or not in Ahmedabad, most of the people would not take public transit as a choice. They would be taking it only because they cannot afford the other mode of transport. I have lived in Canada for 8 years of my life. Seeing the public transit there and seeing the public transit here, it makes a huge difference, and it's kind of a, I can see it as an opportunity for the government and for the people and each and every stakeholder into the system, where they can uplift the public transit system to those levels. That being said, there is a huge scope, and the government, it's good to see that government is doing a lot about it. BRTS, as gentleman just said, that it's a huge success, and more routes are being opened. With BRTS, I can see people using public transit as a choice of mode of transport. A lot of people now, like, you know, I know people going to Kankaria from satellite. They take public transit. They want to take their children in for, like, you know, even the well-to-do people, they want to use public transit so that, first of all, it is efficient, and also they want their children to experience it. That never happened before. If we talk about Ahmedabad 10 years back, people never traveled through bus. Now people are taking it as a choice, so which is a good sign of improvement. In the latest GDCR that has come out, and government has taken a huge steps to increase the population around the public transit, because the biggest challenge that the government also is facing is the viability of providing the public transit. Right now, public transit is running in huge losses, primarily because nobody is using it, or no people, as many people who are not using it. To keep the cost down, they have to run into losses. So eventually, if the public transit becomes the transportation, the choice of transportation, the entire system, entire infrastructure will grow, and more than anything else, the happiness index in people will go up, because you are traveling with people rather than your car. You will be saving a lot of time, you will be saving a lot of energy, you will be saving a lot of fuel cost and time, versus if you're traveling individually on your own, which is prevailing in the western parts of the world. If I talk about Toronto, where I lived for about 8 years, people did not own a car because they thought it was a waste of money. In the downtown part, when I talk about in particular downtown, not the suburbs of Toronto, people would not want to own a car because it's inconvenience. Where to park, carrying cost, insurance, maintenance of the car. Rather, they would use public transit. It is so precise, so nicely developed, it's so scientific that people use it as a choice.
I'll just give a perspective. I think as most of the cities in the world, the development, some cities have adopted the transit-oriented development or the transit system, which is very well accepted in them. While there are many cities in the United States, for example, which are experiencing sprawl, and the only mode of transport is primarily the cars. Now, most of the Indian cities are also moving towards this sprawl thing, where there's more cars, they're getting out of the city, going further places. So that is something which is happening, which is unsustainable, which is not good for the development of the city, not good for the society overall. The other way to look at it is the infill development, where you go in the core of the city and in the heart of city and make it more developable. Once you make it more developable, the question comes, how do you take in more cars? There are already so many cars and there are so many parking lots, but where do we put in more? So that's where the transit-oriented development or the transit-oriented system, the transit zone, transit systems come in place. Now, for example, Ahmedabad has the BRTS system. It has been able to go into the depth of the cities and connect various areas. That is a good start. The next important aspect is, how does those things become the veins or the blood, the carrying veins of the city in terms of the public transit? How does the development around it support it? How does the city then, the city map starts looking like? On those corridors, you see a different kind of a development, because that's been promoted by the city. The city has promoted more development in those corridors where there are those, the BRTS hubs or the metro hubs. So that entire planning is the transit-oriented, that's a transit-oriented zone. Any developments which come into that, which is maybe redevelopment or infill development, different things you call it, that's a transit-oriented development. So I think we are moving in the right direction in Ahmedabad, and ODA is working towards policies and all for those areas, how these things will change.
Good afternoon, everybody. Transit corridors, it's been talked about a lot, but cities have to implement it more efficiently than they are doing it. It's a great idea to utilize and leverage the existing infrastructure that the cities have by putting in these transit systems, because it's not cost effective for Indian cities or Indian municipal corporations or development authorities to go out and build new infrastructure when existing infrastructure within the city is still underutilized. So taking that concept, the cities have adapted a transit systems in different cities, and they're also even trying to give higher density to build around these transit corridors. Now, we're going to discuss that and see how effective that can be for cities not to grow on the periphery and tertiary, and before optimally utilizing their existing infrastructure. Hello.
So we had an interesting perspective on. So a couple of points which I want to carry forward from, carry out from the discussion is it's a good start. So BRTS is a good start. However, what BRTS has done is brought about a cultural change. Kind of people have started accepting public transport. ODA is trying to do a comprehensive integrated planning approach with the metro and the BRTS. Rocky talked about other cities also trying to do, but there's a need for doing it effectively. And we are also talking about a higher FSI. But what really, whether this can really work or not, we need to see. That brings me to the next important part of it. So if you look at a couple of other cities in India where they have tried to do transit-oriented development, so if we talk about, say, Delhi Metro, they have been they have done it quite successfully. That has worked well. So there has been a retail development, commercial developments across the corridors, and the figure says that this has been good. Bangalore has opened their first phase, that is within the city. Hyderabad is planning to do it, that is again within the city. So if you see that the first phase of development primarily is within the city, right? And we are talking about a very high FSI within the city development as well. So on one side, we have a cramped road. The other side, we are trying to create another infrastructure. The third side, people, because of cost of living, are living in the peripheries, and we are trying to create more FSI in the center. So this is a paradox. What's your view on this?
I think so. It is about the infrastructure which we can use it. Dancing is a problem, very honestly, maybe because of the FSI. But if we can have a smart planning, as I'm talking in the not point of view of a building, but for an infrastructure, if some of the, as I said earlier, some of the infrastructure which is already there in the city, suppose if we talk of Ahmedabad, we already have railway stations, 2-3 railway stations connecting the cities. I mean, same can be used for some of the transport from one station to another. I mean, within a city and with a small trams or something like that. That can be one thing. Monorail may be very costly, but still, I think so, as BRT has already been grand success in Ahmedabad, it can be it can be elaborated with a small buses in a dense area, and we can make a very good connectivity by getting reducing the sizes of the buses and etc. And by FSI and all that, one thing is there, we can use that area infrastructure, which I mean, which has took a huge amount of investment till date, by putting an extra parking lot or something like that. So I think that can be sought out in a bait way, and still we can utilize this infrastructure from my.
So let me have a developer perspective on this, and then probably we'll try to bring more perspective around. Rocky, your view on this?
See, all the transit systems run in loss. None of them are profitable. And they're huge. They're hugely capital intensive. Right now, to give an example of the BRTS that is being built here or being expanded in Ahmedabad, is being funded by JN and RUM. Now, this money is, as somebody said in the previous panel discussion, all government money has to be paid back. There's no free money. This money has to be paid back. So if you take Auda's perspective or where these BRTS is being laid, they're going to collect this money from selling the FSI in that corridor. So what they've done is they've taken 500 meters from the center of the BRTS line as transit corridor, additional FSI, which is you're now permissible for density, so that more people start living and working around that transit corridor, and they actually pay for that transit corridor to be built. So the money has to be paid back to JN and RUM. The money that the builder is going to pay to get the additional FSI is not actually going to the development authority or AUDA or AMC. It's going back to repay the cost of that transit corridor. So yes, the additional FSI has to be given to be paid, money to be paid back for the development of the transit corridor. Will it be still enough to pay back for the BRTS? The answer is no from the authorities. So is BRTS the right answer? To me, it's not, because it's still not sustainable. It's still not acceptable by most of the people. Increasing density is actually not going to help. The right answer would be metro. But metro would cost maybe 10 times or 20 times more than the BRTS system. So we'll have to give 40 FSI instead of 4 around the metro, which is not feasible. So there's a huge question of economic viability of these transit corridors. We're living in India, where cities are not very rich. They barely make their budgets meet two ends. Our property tax collection here is spent, 50% of that property tax collection is spent to collect that property tax. Versus in the rest of the world, property tax is paid for the other utilities that you enjoy in a city. So cities have no income. A city of 70, 80 lakh people in Ahmedabad has a budget of 4,000 crores that we just read in a newspaper. It's pittance. You can't run a city of 70 lakh people with 5,000 crores spent a year. And that also they cannot collect the entire money. So structurally there has to be some change. If we think everything has to be paid by the development, or the builders have to pay everything to subsidize the transit systems, it's not going to work. The different thought has to be applied. Recently, meaning the new GDCR got enacted maybe last year, 2013, which has, first time it has mentioned higher FSI around the transit corridor. It has laid down the development guidelines around the transit corridors. They still haven't addressed a lot of issues. They're still learning. The first phase of transit corridor, the BRTS, was put on roads where it shouldn't have been put. They're narrow roads, meaning a master planner would tell you that. They realized it was a disaster. They're not telling this to anybody. Okay. So now they said, okay, we're not going to put BRTS on anything less than 40 meters. Great. What happens to where you put it already, where it's less than 40 meters? So there are a lot of questions need to be answered. And because people or the government wants to show something quick, fast, and we don't have the money to show it, so it's all ad hoc thinking, ad hoc planning, and we'll put it now and we'll think later. That's what happens. So BRTS, we're all saying it's great success. It's a, you know, it's a model to show it to the world. It has failed in rest of the world. I'm not saying our Ahmedabad will fail, but currently it has failed in rest of the world. Even NCR, even Delhi, they had to scrap it after building it. It's a very old, very obsolete way of transiting people, very old. We talk about smart cities, we talk about technology, and then we are implementing something which is already obsolete, which has failed in the rest of the world. There are very few success stories of BRTS being successful in the world. Harsh, you'll have to tell me if there are any.
There are quite a few. I think NCR is, I think in India it has not succeeded. I'm not an big advocate of BRTS, but just my common understanding, in NCR, yes, it failed miserably, and Ahmedabad is one city where it's successful, but over the world, I think there are quite a few examples, like Colombia, Guangzhou, at least the beginning. So there are quite a few examples, but what the people who push for BRTS also say it's much more cost effective and all. So I mean, I am more concerned about the transit-oriented development and the infill development, whether it's a metro or it's BRTS. Metro is definitely has more carrying capacity, but it is definitely much more expensive. So and finance is a completely different thing.
I agree. Government will have to treat these things as infrastructure, not as, to make a cost-neutral efforts. So they'll have to put in few thousand crores in metros and forget about it. It's not recoupable. So they'll have to change their mindset, which metro is the right answer because the central government is giving a grant for metro and it's non-recoverable because they have a different model on metro than the BRTS. So metro is more sustainable. Wherever metro has happened in India, wherever it's functional, it's a great success.
So that brings me to another point. On one side, we are saying that there is a huge funding requirement, and whatever we are seeing at this point of time, like if you talk about Hyderabad, where L&T is trying to do, part of Delhi Metro, Reliance did initially. Similarly, if you talk about Mumbai, a lot of these projects which they wanted to do, they gave to private developers. But ultimately, if you see, we see a lot of issues around the relationship which the government has with the developer on one side. On the second side, the understanding is that you put your money upfront, right? The land will be given by the government. You put your money upfront, and then you recover it by the operation, and then the non-core operation, which is real estate in this case. So, A, it's a long gestation project. B, you need to put money upfront, and C, you need to monetize it once your corridors become effective. You have people traveling in. So, given this scenario, do you think this is the way it will work, or are there any thoughts around how we can tweak it? Anyone? Anand.
See, first of all, to begin with, to your previous question, I think it is the greatest thing that has happened that they are looking at developing communities surrounding where the public transit is present, because the haphazard development has happened in Gujarat. We can absolutely see that compared to the western part where, Sun City was developed 20 years back in Bhopal where there was no life there, and government had to go all the way through maybe 15 kilometers away from the city to provide them roads, sewer, electricity, and so on. So there is no doubt about that, development has to be done around where the public transit is. That is how other cities are also developing across the world. Even San Francisco today, which is such a developed city, they are talking about TOD, basically. Talking about public-private partnership in public transit, again, I think that is a trend that I've seen across the world where government, see, even Narendra Modi today is saying that, maximum governance, minimum government. So what he's trying to say is that they are there to give the directives, they are there to take care of the public interest, they do not want to be so much involved in execution. We have a track record of more than 60 years of how nicely our government can execute projects. So while we talk about public transit is rather miserably failed because it's not a choice, as I said earlier. Today it's not a choice of transport, it is only by force people use it. It's no convenience. Because they cannot afford, they are using it. There is no convenience that you get in using public transit today. if a private player comes into the play and they provide better services, there will be a choice, it will become a choice. And that is that we have witnessed in a lot of things. Today, Torrent Power, Ahmedabad Electricity Company, now it is being privatized. We see lot less outages. Yes, it is going to get more expensive. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. As long as you're getting better services, people are willing, no matter how much we complain today about the electricity prices, one thing we are happy today that we can still sit in this air-conditioned hall and not worry about power outage. So that's a fact. If a public-private partnership is going to be there, there has to be cost involved into it. If a huge corporations are given that responsibility, they have that capitalization that they can, over a period of ages, they can nullify it. We have one great example in Canada that is called 407 ETR, Express Toll Route, where there's a public highway which is being privatized now. It's an expressway, so you have to pay money and then you have to use that road. And after it was given from government to the private agencies, the usage of that particular road quadrupled. So, yes, it did get expensive, but at the same time, it encouraged more and more people to use it. So that is one aspect of looking at it. While the expense will go up, that is upfront expense, there's a lot of other benefits that came along with using that ETR. That was your time saved, your gas, basically your petrol, and your maintenance of the car reduced for everybody who was using that road. So you cannot just look at one aspect of the cost. There is a lot of other aspects involved in it. I think that's my take on it.
I think it's a long-term view. First, you have to remember it's a long-term view. A transit-oriented development in a city or a transit system in a city cannot be built overnight. It's not going to be built in 5 years. It's going to take much more longer time. And the way it would impact the citizens overall in terms of whether I start going to my office by public transport. If I was in San Francisco, I would have probably been. I was in Pittsburgh, I was taking the public transport. In Ahmedabad, I am not. How do I change that? That scenario will take time, and I think having that transit system which connects different parts of the city in an efficient manner, that's the only way to move ahead in that direction. Now the financing and all is a different aspect which I would not be, I'm not an expert on it, so I cannot. But how we connect the feeder system, the feeder buses, the last mile connectivity, the development happens, more FSI around those zones, the central business district, all those are going to affect. What is also going to affect is the streetscapes. I'll just give a small example. We have, as a consultants, we have been trying to work with AMC for the last couple of months on taking up some of the streets of Ahmedabad and doing a pilot project of better streetscapes, which are more walkable and all. So at home, I was talking to my wife, and my 6-year-old son was listening, and I used the word streetscapes. His first question, what is a streetscape? I told him, better sidewalks where you can walk. There's some row of trees. His instant answer was, we have just visited Thailand. Oh, jaise Thailand mein thi. So this guy has not, his impression of sidewalks and better places where you can walk from your one place to other goes back to Thailand. He cannot relate of those in the cities he has been in India that much. So I think that overall has to, and I think having a transit system is a start.
The question you said is about how do you implement them with PPP. That's the only way to do it. There's no other way. Government cannot execute it, as we said. They're not in the business of running businesses. So they will need private players to come in, and there is enough opportunity. I think Hyderabad was a classic example. Mitas, which went bankrupt, had bidded successfully for the entire metro, not just phases of metro, entire metro. And it was a great real estate play for them because they would take each of these stations and exploit it commercially to build and sell real estate. That would subsidize the actual cost, the capital cost of the entire metro or transit corridor. And then operating them after they're built is not profitable, but at least your capital cost has come down to significantly low or zero or negative because you've exploited real estate. And that's a great model. more cities should adopt that. They're doing this mega in Ahmedabad. They have not adopted that. They've set up an SPV. They're going to get funded from different sources of government. They're going to execute them by giving a contract to private contractors in tranches, in phases, in geographies, and then try to figure it out as to what to do with these commercial stations. And somebody else is going to come in, a private player is going to come in and exploit the real estate around it. So it's not greatly being implemented. I don't